At his press conference in early January 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron expressed alarm at the birth rate crisis affecting the country and announced a number of measures designed to halt the downward trend. But the policies he has pursued since his first term in office are systematically harming the interest of families. For several years now, France's birth rate figures, like those in other European countries, have not been good. For a long time, France boasted a higher birth rate than its neighbors, but this blessed period is over. 2023 has seen the lowest number of births since 1945. There is a global misunderstanding between French leaders and family, advocating the need for France to rearm itself demographically. Macron put forward measures to be implemented in the coming month. After all this hype, unfortunately, there are few miracles to be expected from his outburst of voluntarism. A fortnight after the press conference, Prime Minister Gabriel Atal delivered his first policy speech to MPs, dramatically devoid of any family policy. His government appointed an LGBT activist as Deputy Minister for Family, the first French MP that came out as lesbian. All this is not new. Emmanuel Macron began his first term in office in 2017 by limiting his family policy to the issue of medically assisted procreation for homosexual couples. A few months ago, the right in France pointed out the glaring failure to take into account the birth rate in the debates on pension reform, even though the French system is based on a pay-as-you-go system, and can only hold with a dynamic birth rate. In 1946, just at the end of World War II, family-oriented programs accounted for 40% of social security expenditure. Governments at the time believed that it was in their interest to support families for demographic reasons, an essential condition for the generosity of the welfare state. This strategy was gradually abandoned. The demographic issue, conceived as an issue of prosperity and power, has totally disappeared from public debate. As a result, nowadays, family-oriented programs now account for just 7% of social security expenditure. Macron is coming at the end of a trend that began long before him, notably under socialist Lionel Jospin's ministry, and it's only accentuating dramatically. The government does not understand families and does not know how to propose appropriate solutions. There is a deep crisis of confidence among families, which is the real explanation for the system decline in the French birth rate. As an example, the announced reform of parental leave made by Emmanuel Macron is emblematic of the mismatch between the policy proposed and the real needs of families. At present, parents in France can benefit from what is known as parental leave, which offers one of the two parents, usually the mother, the opportunity to put their professional activity into brackets for 2 years in exchange for a symbolic allowance. Deeming it too long and insufficiently remunerated, Macron wants to replace with a birth leave lasting 6 months and a significant compensation. Apparently, it's attractive on the paper, but this new leave actually creates more problems than it solves. Mothers who wish to look after their child beyond 6 months will no longer have the option to do so. And there are no plans to improve childcare solutions once the 6 months period is over. The government remains obsessed with the idea that work is the primary place for women to fulfill their potential and that they should be able to return to work as soon as possible to avoid, it is thought, fractures in the world of work. They claim to be pro-choice, but the notion of a mother's free choice and the development of part-time work are totally absent from this productivist vision, which believes that parents who spend time looking after their children are socially useless. The best proof of the French government's inability to conceive a genuine family policy can be seen in certain measures taken at the very moment when the catastrophic birth rate figures are being published. First, the inclusion of abortion in the Constitution, and unfortunately, we can thank France for having given the ideas to MEPs to include it in the European Charter for Fundamental Rights. Let them be forgiven. They perfectly know what they're doing. Another measure, the increase in the bonus paid to doctors who are performing abortions, or free condoms given to the youth. And yet, there is indeed a political front to be opened up on the subject of the 230,000 abortions performed every year in France. These births are missing, and these abortions are very often carried for financial reasons, as a recent study of our friends of the ECLJ proves. 75% of women who have had an abortion say they were forced into it by social or economic constraints. Social determinism is there playing it full. In its study, the ECLJ points out that if abortion were full by 50% in France, the fertility rate would rise back above the mark of 2 children per woman. The stakes are high. We could include also, of course, the ongoing bill about euthanasia, which is, of course, a way to encourage the resignation of families towards suffering and pain of their relatives. More fundamentally, France's lack of fruitful family policies perhaps to be found in the relationship between the country's leader and the family. French tradition used to consider that the family of the ruler was a private matter. Who cared about King Henry IV's mistresses as long as his reign was a reign of peace and prosperity? But at least the king knew what a family was. And there was a time, not so far, when there were responsible fathers at the head of the country. You may know the story of General de Gaulle, cold and sometimes distant. He was totally fond of his little girl, Anne, a child with Down syndrome, to which he showed the deepest affection. Times have changed. Social norms are vanishing. The weakening of family ties in society over the years has been echoed in the families of successive presidents. Nicolas Sarkozy was married 3 times, with children in each union. François Hollande never married the mother of his 4 children, and the Élysée Palace has been the succession of 2 or more or less unofficial or official, who knows, of his mistresses. As for Emmanuel Macron, his union with Brigitte Macron, which has fueled, as you may know, some wildest rumors, was deliberately sterile from the outset. The new Prime Minister, Gabriel Atal, proudly evoked his homosexuality during his general policy speech. As a result, the notion of family can only have a diffuse and abstract meaning for them and tends to be limited to dubious accounting balances. Policymakers find themselves talking about the family in a way that is increasingly disconnected from the realities of parents and their expectations. For example, Gabriel Atal recently proposed a reduced week of work for divorced parents. Wouldn't it be wiser to encourage the cohesion of families instead? Today, there is a significant gap between the actual number of children in French families and the desired number. Parents are reluctant to expand their families because, especially in big cities, it is hard to find the proper accommodation. They are penalized when they want to change cars. They are unable to provide childcare. They dread the day when the children will have to go to school full of violence, where they will learn nothing. These terrible, concrete, and simple problems are completely beyond the grasp of government officials. In the autumn of 2022, Raymond Deor, a French doctor in human science, published a book, Faut-il en finir avec la famille? It is time to do away with the family. He analyzed the fundamental mistrust of the French political sphere towards the family. The political and media sphere's distrust of the family has become a necessary marker of its progressivism. I quote, "The elite bloc has changed paradigm. Economic liberalism and social liberalism have merged in hostility to intermediary bodies and the apology on individualism," explains the researcher. The family is now the target of this state of mind. The riots in June 2023, after the death of young Naël, brought the family back in the spotlight. A few inspired civil servants came up with the idea of launching parenting workshops. They had one or two fleeting flashes of insight into the role of the father's authority. But these are only temporary revelations. We have not fundamentally changed the paradigm of the ruling elites, who still refuse to see the family as an added value and not as a raw social fact. We all know there that the favorite weapon in the demographic challenge brandished by progressives is, of course, immigration. Believing in its efficiency is also the result of a wrong conception about family. Mass immigration, of course, generates the well-known problems of the juxtaposition of the communities and the dilution of the native culture. Choosing immigration to limit the problems of labor market and social security contribution will not solve the human problem of emotional solidarity and the transmission of a nation's material and symbolic heritage. You may have noticed during the farmers' demonstrations of the last month that there were very few immigrants among them. Because to cultivate a land, you have to know it and to love it. Immigration can give daily workers, but very few farmers. An immigrant employed by a service agency may come to clean the house of your grandmother, but he will not witness her memories and take her last breath. Only the family is capable of doing that, and that's what it makes it irreplaceable. Unfortunately, the French political class is not yet aware of its invaluable role. So before putting the ballot in the ballot box, don't forget to think at the family plans of the leaders you want to support. That is of great interest, and it's not a personal matter. Thank you.